Hello everyone. So today we will be discussing about a very important aspect of ancient Indian history, which we actually categorize under History of India too. Under History of India too, there are four blocks. As you can see, the first block is India from 200 BCE to 300 CE, which is popularly known as the post-Mauryan era or post-Mauryan period. Next, we will be discussing about the rise of Guptas as well as post-Gupta state and society. Then we'll be discussing about the transition to early medieval India and why do we have that particular phase, that is early medieval India. The last block would be the cultural developments expanding from 200 BCE to almost 1000 CE. When we talk about the first block, we will be covering almost 5 units. The first unit would be about the rise of the regional powers, Shunga and Kushanas, who were actually foreign rulers, how they came into power, and how they intermingled with the Indian society. Then we would be discussing about other emergence of other regional powers. And in these two chapters, you should mainly focus on how the advent of different types of coins help us to indicate who were the rulers and for how much time period they actually ruled and what was the extent of their rule. Then we'll be discussing about early state formation in Deccan as well as in Tamilakam. Here we will be discussing about Satavahanas as well as 5 different ecozones, especially in South India. Then coming forward, we'll be discussing about the agrarian settlements and agrarian societies, specifically in peninsular India. The next chapter is trade networks and urbanization. When we talk about this whole block, you will be seeing how different regional powers came in India, settled here, and ruled, and how they left their control, as well as the most important thing to understand is the inscriptions as well as the study of coins that was left here. As you can see here, Indo-Scythians, Kushanas, Indo-Greeks, we'll be discussing about the extent of gold coins, silver coins, nickel coins, copper coins, their quantity, which actually determines the economical state of that particular regional power. Saka Kshatrapas, Satavahanas, and Tamilakam. Next block, the second block, the first unit would definitely be about rise of Guptas, economy, society, and polity. After that, the seventh unit would be the post-Gupta kingdoms in North India, which were the kingdoms that came to rule after the Guptas diminished. If you would see very clearly, Unit 8 is actually taken from Unit 7, where we will be discussing about different kingdoms that came in North India, out of which Harsha came to be a dominant ruler, and we will be discussing how he failed to centralize North India. We will be also discussing about rise of Kannauj as the most important city instead of Patliputra. Then we'll be discussing about kingdoms in the Deccan and the south after the destruction of Satavahanas. We'll be discussing about Chalukyas, Pallavas, Cheras, Pandyas. Then we'll be moving to block 3, where we will be discussing about trade and urbanization, status of women, crafts and craftsperson, religion and religious practices. If I might remind you, this is actually at the period of early medieval phase. And while following the early medieval phase, we will be discussing what was happening in trade and how it was actually impacting the society, as well as the status of women. We will be discussing it by comparing it to Gupta period and even before that, how the status of women actually declined. Then we'll be discussing about crafts and craftsperson, where we will be actually focusing mainly on Jajmani system and how it came to play such an important role and how land grants became the trend. Then we'll be discussing about religion and religious practices that actually dominated the society of that time. In continuation to it, we will be studying about languages and literature, sculpture and architecture, science and technology, economy and trade, environment, forest, and water resources. When we talk about languages and literature, we would be focusing on how the language played a very important role in the society and if they were actually allowed to read and write in that particular language or not. That is really important to understand. Then we come to sculpture and architecture. While discussing about sculpture and architecture, we will actually be starting from 200 BCE as we'll be studying about stupas. Then we'll be studying about temple architecture, specifically in Gupta period. And we'll be also studying about sculptures, especially the contribution of all the foreign regional powers that came during 200 BCE, especially after the decline of Mauryans. Science and technology also played a really important part during the whole time period from 200 BCE to 1000 CE. We'll be actually mentioning some facts, some inventions that happened during that period of time. We'll be discussing about how economy and trade came to happen eventually from 200 BCE to 1000 CE, if the international trade was constant from that particular period of time to early medieval phase, or did it decline or did it increase. Then we'll be discussing about environment, forest, and water resources and how they can actually be combined with religious practices. While ending the introduction, it's really important to understand the scope and importance of that particular unit and also the subunits. We all know that it has to be an important part of history learning of our country. It's also important that it is an very essential part of ancient history of India whenever we discuss about the developmental process of sculptures or architecture or how a temple came to existence. It's also important to study the early medieval phase and also discuss the debate surrounding it. We'll be also discussing if that particular phase was one of dynamism or decline, which is one of the most important aspects to discuss. Of course, we will be undertaking a critical approach to the whole period. Thank you so much. Hope you guys understand. Thank you.